Posik in Shir Hashirim, Yonosi bechagvei hasela, my beloved dove is in the crevices of the boulder, of the stone, Beseisa Madrega, hidden level. Ha'ini es mareich, show me your appearance, Hashmiini es kolech, let me hear your voice, ki koilech orev u'marayach nova. Because your voice, your appearance is attractive, is beautiful, and your voice is pleasant, is sweet. The Vilna Gaon, on that part of the posuk, the second part of the posuk, Harini es marayach, is a reference to Chanukah. Hashmiini es kolech is a reference to Purim, because Purim, the mitzvah is the listening, the hearing the Megillah. Kriyas Megillah, we make the bracha, that's the takona. And the mitzvah of Chanukah is seeing the Neirus. What is number one is that historically, we know that Purim came first. There was the rebuilding of the second Beis Hamikdash, which the Chashmonaim refurbished and put together again. They did a Chanukah Mizbeach and cleansed from the befouling of the pollution of the Greeks. But historically, Purim came first. That was the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash through Darius. Number one. Number two, so how come the Shlomo Melech refers first to Chanukah? In fact, also the very question he asked, in the takonis of the year, in the calendar, we're experiencing Chanukah now. We're going towards Chanukah, and Purim comes later, month of Adar. We're in Kislev, and first comes Chanukah. Okay, it's just that to understand. But as far as the posuk is concerned, there is a switch in the posuk, which the Gra doesn't talk about. That first, as I just said, we talk about Chanukah, Harini, Marayach, and then Hashmiini es kolech, Hashmiini es kolech. But the posuk at the end switches and says, Ki koilech orev, your voice is sweet, umarayach nove, and your appearance is beautiful. It switches to Purim first and then Chanukah, to end with Chanukah. So, halo dovahu, what is the posuk switch? Okay, so we have to try and understand that. The Mefoshim talk about the mitzvah of the Menorah, and we know that there's a correlation between the Chanukah and the Menorah. The Malbim in his droshes, Eretz Chemda, over there points out that early on in Bereshis, with the creation of the celestial bodies that give the light, the posuk doesn't end as the other psukim do by creation, by Yehi Chen, and it was like that. It's missing. For some reason, it doesn't say Vayehi Chen. Later on, by the mitzvah of the Menorah, in Parshas Ba'alei Yisro, the Malbim over there says that the words that seem to be miyutar, that seem to be extra. Vayas Aaron Cain. Aaron did as he was bid. Seems rather strange that the Rebbe Shem told any of us we'd also do it, let alone Aaron HaKohen. It's a Kavachema ben Bnei Shel Kavachema. So Kedushas Levi says something very, very charming. He says that if he would have been commanded to light the menorah, so after filling the kad, which he's going to pour the shemen into the menorah, his hand would have been shaking, so he would have spilled it all over the place. So the fact that Aaron was capable of expediting it with discipline and with control is complimentary and is worthy of note. Okay, that's the Kedushas Levi. The Ramban points out over there that Aaron HaKohen was, and Rashi brings it, it's a Chazal, it's a Medrash, and Rashi brings it, and the Ramban talks about it, is that Aaron had delayed, did not participate in the bringing of the Korbanos of the Nesiim, which we read those Korbanos during the week of Pesach, the 8 days. Because of that, he was suffering somewhat that he hadn't participated. He had waited for whatever cheshbon he had. And he had a cheshbon. He waited to see what would be missing, but he didn't participate in that. But that was by the gifting of to the Mishkan, and perhaps something similar over here, that he was waiting for whatever reason. Now the Rebbeinu Shalom is compensating him, is telling him, no. Your cheshbon was whatever your cheshbonis were. They were l'shem shamayim. They were adequate, accurate, and you're going to get a compensation. You're going to get that when the Beis Mikdash will lo aleinu be destroyed by a Rishon, by a Sheni, that there'll still be in Golus, Jews will have a continuity of that relationship to the Menorah. They'll have Me'ain, something that is a kind of representation of the Menorah. They'll have a Chanukah. Now, that answers the question, because the obvious question is that when you don't have a Beis Mikdash, you don't have a Mizbeach. Okay, so there's no Kabon, there are no Kabonis. The Kabonis can't continue until the Beis Mikdash Shlishi is rebuilt. On the other hand, the Menorah is also not there. Ah, yes, but there is the Chanukah. The question is that the Chanukah is a simulacrum. It's a representation of the Menorah, but it isn't the Menorah per se. And if today's Chanukah, as we read in Shulchan Aruch, everybody lights. Kohen, Yisrael, and a Levi. So what is unique and specific to Kohanim that will pacify Aaron HaKohen, that will give him this sense of specialness, that he is making a unique contribution? Everybody's going to light. So it's not specific to placate him, to pacify him on not participating with the Menorah, if that is supposed to be the replacement of the Menorah. Bnei Yissaschar famous Bnei Yisoscha brings, he himself said that he felt that he's quoted as having said that the shorish of his neshama was in Chanukah. He brings the Medrash, Bracious Medrash says, and there was Choshech Pnei Ha'Sa'oim, Ruach Elokim Rachas Al Pnei Hamoim. The Soyu is Bovel. It's a prediction of the Goliaths that are to come, that Risias Ootz V'Soyu, Yirmiyahu Novi says. Vayu is Porus Modai, that Goliath of Purim time, that the Vayavhilu Lahovias Haman. Choshech is the Greeks. Why the Greeks? Because Shehechshichu Eseni Yisrael, they darkened the eyes of Yisrael, B'Gzeiroseim, and they said, Kisvu al keren hashor she'en lechem chelek b'elokei Yisrael. Right on the horns of the shore, that you have no portion in the God of Israel. En lechem chelek b'elokei Yisrael. Forshim already indicate this rather peculiar tzivui kisvo keren hashor. That was the way they sent emails, faxes in those days. They wrote it on the horns of a shore, and they sent it from place to place. And possibly there was an allusion to the weak underbelly of Klal Yisrael, the Chet HaEgel, that was also being called up on the screen of the collective and cosmic memory. Okay, but what is it that they're saying? What's the message? Says the Bnei Yisoscha, what is it that keeps Jews able to do battle with the Greeks in each generation, with the Greeks of each generation, and the culture that they find themselves in, the choshech, in the darkness of Golus. Golus is darkness. Darkness is Golus. So the Bnei Yisoscha explains that the koyach of Klal Yisrael is the koyach of Torah. It's the koyach of Torah Shebal Peh. The koyach of Torah Shebal Peh, that Klal Yisrael has the ability to be mechadesh, to learn, to innovate whatever new takonas are necessary for each place and each time as they march towards Mashiach. And the Greeks were saying, forfeit your conviction that you're going to make it to the finish line in history to meet Mashiach. How are you going to do that? How are you going to make it to that finish line? By being able to be mechadish. How are you mechadish? The koyach of Torah Shebal Peh. As the Netziv points out in his Pirush on Divrei Hayomim, that the proliferation of Torah Shebal Peh, the takonos and gzeiros that are necessary for each place and time, the fascinating, complex genius of Klal Yisrael that allowed them to innovate and be mechadish in each place and time, what was unique to that particular place and time, allowed them to be different enough that they could remain the same. Because in essentials, the Yud Gimel Midas Sheter Nidreshes Behem, they were working from the same base of axioms, and therefore the Jews developed different minhagim in different places that allowed them, that was, the shock came to the periphery that the minhagim absorbed, but the core commitment to halacha remained the same and could be protected, which is unparalleled by any other lahavdil, any other culture in history to have been able to master that genius. We've told this story of in some of our classes. Some people listening might remember, is that many years ago, decades ago, I came into a sociology class in Brooklyn College, and the instructor was, those years, he was reading the names with his dipping his pen in the inkwell and writing in, checking off whatever notations he wanted to make. He wanted to have face recognition of the students, right? Pre-computer era. Comes to me, I'm the only fellow sitting in the class with a yarmulke, and he says, "What are you doing here, Mr. Schiller?" Now, you recollect, some of you, that I had my jousting matches with various instructors. This was the first day, unlikely that somebody tipped him off. It wasn't that important for anybody. So I said, "What's your problem, Mr. Waterman?" So he said, "Well, you must be a student of the Talmud." I said, "I am." He said, "Then the greatest sociologists of all times were the Talmudists. If they could keep a people identifying together as a nation, though they're dispersed around the world, they're in dispersion all over in exile, and yet they retain a consciousness and identity as a people, then there's nothing I could teach you more about sociology than you've already learned from the Talmud." I told him, "Mr. Waterman, I can put you at ease. I have no intention of learning anything. I want 3 credits for the course," and we got along wonderfully after that. But he was right. The koch of Torah, to march to meet Mashiach as it's the koch of Torah Shebal Peh. He mentions over there, the Bnei Yisosra, that the sod, the secret of Torah Shebal Peh, is David HaMelech. I assume what he means is that there couldn't be a David HaMelech without the diuk Moyovi Omalom Yobis, the Beis Din of Shmuel Aramosi. That Beis Din, that in fact made that diuk. That's a diuk. From that diuk, there comes a Rus, and there comes a Yishai, and there comes a David HaMelech, and Mashiach will come. So it's all from Torah Shebal Peh. It's the koach of Torah Shebal Peh. Now, but let's come back to our question. How does that placate Aaron a Kohen? I'm not a Kohen. And I light a Chanukah also. And in my home, the children do too. It's a mitzvah where there's a lot of mahadran mina mahadran, that a lot of people light in the same household even. Perhaps we might understand it like this. The Menorah, the Zohar teaches, the Medrash teaches, and we find it in the Meforshim, referred back to often, is that the Menorah was the source of Chochmah. But the Netziv says there are 2 real prime Makoros of Hashros, Hashchina, of the indwelling presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom being funneled, cabled to Klal Yisrael through the Beis Mikdash. Torah Shebiksav is the Oren. Torah Shebal Peh is the Menorah. A Roitza, Lahachkim, somebody who wants wisdom, Yadrim, he faces the Menorah. The Menorah, that's why Reb Tarfon says, somebody says something brilliant and a new insight. He says, Kaftor of Herach, the embellishments of the flowers and the ornaments of the Menorah. So the Menorah represents this koach of Torah Shebal Peh. It's even brought in the Sam Sefer brings it, the Ksav Sefer brings it, that Moshe Rabbeinu would face the light of the Menorah to get dimensions of insight in the Seidos of Torah, the secrets of Torah. So So Chanukah is now going to be a time, Yehi Ma'oirus, the Meforshim point out, Yehi Ma'oirus, where it doesn't say Vayas Cain over there, as the Malbim notes in his drosha. Yehi is 25, Yehi, in Gematria. That Cain that was missing, Yehi Cain, was because the Rebbeinu Shalom saw that initial light that was created, which the Rokeach brings, and there are sources in Midrashim and Zohar, the Rokeach Rishon brings, that was there for 36 hours before it was removed and put aside for tzaddikim, for La'osid Lovai, because the world was too flawed to be able to tolerate the brilliance of that light. Part of that light is returned in the 36 candles that we light of the Chanukah. That's coming back. Why? Because that is the koyach of Torah Sheba'al Peh, is what the miracle of Chanukah is all about. Yes, there was a war, but as the Meshech Chochmah and others point out, it has happened sometimes that a small group can vanquish a larger army. Motivation, passion, nothing to lose. They throw caution to the wind. The Pirush Rashi, the comment on the miraculousness of the Milchoma, which the Alanisim talks about in the Milchoma primarily, that the ness of the menorah, of the shemen, what I saw, that was definitively a breach of the norms of Teva. Teva is the Greeks subordinating all man's motivations, sensitivities to the norms of nature, Teva. The Jew says no. The miracle is 8 days. The 8th is transcending the 7. Just like Matan Torah was, after counting, coming out of Pesach and counting 7 times 7 for the Yemei Asfira, it's the 50th day, corresponding to the 8th, is that the day that transcends, and that's Bris Milah, it'll be on the 8th day, where man is asked to perform, to behave in a certain manner, to fulfill the Rotzon of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and then you become eligible, you become enfranchised to defy the laws and the norms of sociology, psychology, and the norms of how people behave. Jews will be different throughout history. And so, this koyach was put into the menorah. Aaron, Vayas Aaron Cain, Aaron succeeded in investing the chibur, the connection of a Kohen, the Kohen, the Kohen HaGadol, investing that koyach of man's chibur to eternity, to history going up and back, to being able to transcend the norms that govern and control the behavior of other nations and other individuals in history. That's the koyach of Torah Shebaal Peh. It was Aaron's investing that allowed Klal Yisrael to make a takona. I make a bracha, sheki d'shanim etzasav etzishvonim. The Rebbeinu Shem commanded me to light the Chanukah. Where? There's no such pasuk. Yes, but it's in Shulchan Aruch. Why is it in Shulchan Aruch? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a Torah that also has a Torah Shebaal Peh. Indivisible. Teiros, it says by Avram. It says it more than once in Torah. Teiros, that the Torah Shebiksav always had a Torah Shebaal Peh. But post Shviras Haluchas, post the breaking of the Luchas that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down by the Chet HaEgel, then the Medrash says, from now there's going to be a new way of accessing the meaning of Torah Shebiksav through Torah Shebaal Peh in a different manner. At one time it was somehow, it shone from there was a beacon of clarity that emanated from the klaf of the Torah, of the Ksav, but now it's going to have to be through the man's investing, amelus, industry, understanding, analysis, man's participation. And it's a compensation, says the Medrash, that is given to man, that now the Jew will have this koyach. But how did it happen? Because Aaron invested that in the menorah, in creating this chibur between the moment and history, between the moment of the Beis Mikdash and extending that koyach of Torah Shebaal Peh that gave us the ability, empowered us, that through the generations we could initiate the legislation that would be just enough to be a chiddush, but not a departure, not a shinui. Balancing act, walking a tightrope in history. How do you innovate without departing from the ideal and remain on the same page? How do you fulfill that mandate of changing enough to remain the same? It's always going to be governed by range and authority. The range there's that which is non-negotiable, which can't be changed. And there's that which, in fact, can be initiated. Who's going to decide? Authority. Who are the authority? Man Malchi Malchus, the Rabbonon, who are the Malachim. The Bnei Yisoscha continues, and he points out that brings the Yerushalmi, Masechta Shkolim, Perek Vov, the Yerushalmi says that Yehu and Shaul were anointed with a pach, and their malchus was overus, passed on, didn't last. They didn't give it over to another generation. David and Shlomo, their malchus was with a keren, and it was kayom, kayemes. It was established to continue, and Mashiach will also come, and there was a continuity of that malchus for generations until there was machlekes with Rechovam, with Yerovam, and everything. But Lamaisa, there was continuity, and there will be a revisiting of that continuity again. Says the Bnei Yisoscha, Pach in Gematria is Yimloch. He will rule. Keren is Yimloch la'olam vo'ed. He will rule for eternity. The Greek said, Kisvu al Keren HaShor, right on the Keren HaShor, forfeit your conviction for that Mashiach, for meeting Yimloch la'olam vo'ed, for meeting that Mashiach who will be from Beis David. Give it up. And the Jews, the Chashmonaim, said no, they found a Pach. And Pach plus Ner, Pach plus Ner is Keren, points out the Bnei Yisoscha. That was the bridge to connect. Amazingly enough, one of the great paradoxes of Jewish history is these Chashmonaim, they held on to the Malchus too long. They were Kohanim. They should have given it back to Beis David. That's a separate discussion, not for now. But what they did, they did. And we celebrate the ness that they brought to the world with the lighting of the Chanukah candles. We asked on the posik that the Gor Daushans, Harini es Ma'ayach Chanukah. I have to make a bracha on seeing the candles. I can even, the considerations of if I haven't lit myself, I wasn't able to, for whatever aloneness, and if I see somebody else lighting, can I? The seeing. There's something in the seeing. Hashmiini is kolech. Why does it switch by your voice? That's Purim. How come the posik switches? Ki kolech orev umarech nove. Perhaps the Ramban says in Parshas V'Eschanan on the Pen Tishkach that every time a Jew learns Torah, he's revisiting the moment at Sinai. He's reliving, reenacting the kailos of Vokim, all the miraculousness that is condensed, all that energy, the thunder, the lightning, the event of Klal Yisrael standing together there. It's probably part of why every time, until we get everybody into the Beis Medrash and all Jews are revisiting and relearning, then we'll always be missing something. That dikduk chaverim and the sharing of Torah is not just a nice thing. It's not just admirable. It's a prerequisite. It's necessary for me to understand Torah, is that I need everybody coming in to offer their ideas, insights in the excitement and the electricity and the tumult of the Beis Medrash. And so we make a bracha every morning ba'arevna that we should be mosuk. There should be a sweetness in our learning of Torah. It's unusual because mitzvahs lav le'enes nitnu. Mitzvahs weren't given for us to enjoy per se. That's not the purpose of the mitzvah. It's wonderful to enjoy doing a mitzvah, but that's not the you're enjoying it because you're doing the Ratzon Hashem. That's one thing, but you're enjoying the mitzvah as such. The experience, would seem to be not the ideal. It's, in a sense, your personal indulging is competing with yes, if it happens to be congruent, fine, wonderful, ideal. Perhaps that has to do with the idea of the initially when the Tam Ha'etz was not Ketam HaPri, that the first breach in the fulfillment of the Rotzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Maral explains was built into the Bria for some reason, is that there was a separation, that the tree and its bark should have tasted like the fruit itself. That means and end should have been identical. It didn't happen for whatever reasons. And maybe that's what the tikkun is all about. The corrective in history will be when means and ends partake of one another. The masikos of learning Torah. That's what the Eglei Tal explains. The sweetness, yes, we enjoy, but that isn't my initial motivation just to enjoy. Will I start Shaloi Lishmor just to enjoy? Of course, I'll start with for the aesthetic experience, but ultimately I have to get to the point where primary is that I'm fulfilling the will of the giver of the Torah, the master of the universe, the creator of the universe, of Torah and me. In that grand plan of Istaka B'Raisa Bor Alma, we as Jews at a certain point in history are anticipated there. So perhaps we could see the switch in the Psukim why Shlomo Melech says again, Arinius Marayach, that's show me your appearance, that it's beautiful, but Harin Hashmiini is kolech, your voice, and then it switches. First comes then the voice. Perhaps it's anticipating that historically, Purim comes first. There's going to be a Purim that will come first. And the Purim coming first, there it's a ksav that we're reading. The mitzvah is with a ksav, it's the last of that which was allowed, given over to be written, Baruch HaKodesh Chazal. And there the mitzvah, it's b'ksav, the mitzvah is the voice, the hearing. The Chanukah, nothing b'ksav for Chanukah. Baruch HaKodesh. That already is after. But there the mitzvah is going to be on the Riyah, the seeing. It's all about Teresh Shabal Peh, Chidush of Teresh Shabal Peh, the oral law, which, yes, but we're talking now about the Chibur revisiting, as the Ramban says, the moment at Sinai, where they were Royim as HaKolos, they saw the sounds. That which is normally just heard was seen, that which was normally seen was also heard. Somehow there was a moment of miraculousness. Ulai hein hadvorim, that Purim comes first, but we're going to need a miracle when we are reconnecting to the sound of Purim, which is a sound that is seen and articulated in the Kriya of the Megillah. And when we will come to, we're going to have a moment in our national experience of a miracle of joining the Pach and the Keren, connecting back to the Pach and the Ner to get to Keren, in order to get back to that moment when Aaron HaKohen implanted in our DNA of Klal Yisrael, the koyach of Chochmas HaTorah, to be able to be meschaber, that we can connect to the koyach of Chiddush in each door and each generation. And that it should be Chiddush for Yasar and Cain. He did it ideally. And without that miracle of that moment, of that connection, then the miracle of 8 days of Chanukah could not have happened. And the Gzeira, the Takona, that we should be able to be lighting candles today with Jews all over the world, lighting Chanukiot, celebrating the triumph over the Greeks, revisiting that again and again each year, because we transcend the limitations that govern all other people. Hashem Yazor, that we should see, hear, see that which is normally heard, hear that which is normally seen. This chibur of the koyach of Torah Sheba'al Peh to connect us to the moment at Sinai, and we should see that it should be a facilitator of tshuva, that we're taught lahalocha that those wicks that are normally not good enough for Shabbos are usable, in fact, for Chanukah, that just a little bit of an ability to reconnect is enough to have an achiza, that the flame, the light, can be lit, and we can, in fact, invoke the blessing of the Ribbon Shalom told us, light these candles. How so? Through the Chachomim of each door, Man Malchi, who's the Malchus, Rabbonon, the Rabbonon that paskind in Halacha, the rare, unequaled achievement of innovation without departure from the ideal. V'yasar and Cain. Happy Chanukah to one and all.